555.
Good evening, listeners of Voice of Africa Radio. It's 1st of December 2014. You still tune into Voice of Africa Radio. This evening, we will be discussing these important issues, talking about EU migrants in the United Kingdom, as now the political atmosphere is heating up. Mr. Cameron and some members of the Conservative are dancing to the tune of UKIP to an extent that they wouldn't hesitate getting Britain out of the European Union. Last week, Mr. Cameron's speech has hinted that EU migrants could be deported from the United Kingdom if they haven't found a job in 6 months' time, and benefit to the EU migrants in the United Kingdom can also be capped, and the legalities of deporting EU migrants and capping of free movement of persons within the European nation. I have with me in the house Elizabeth Jones, UKIP Deputy Chairwoman SADC, a prospective parliamentary candidate for Dartford. I have with me Mahmoud Faiz, who is also a Liberal Democrat Leighton and Wanstead, a human rights activist and also a social-political commentator. To join me this evening to do this discussion is Lembit Öpik, a former MP, a Liberal Democrat MP, a very influential one, of course, dubbed the Cheeky MP. He will also join me via the telephone before he gets here. And I've got Imam Mohammed Bashir also on the line to talk about this important issue with us, as Shariah, the Islamic law, has also been asked the British Law Society and the guideline for solicitors to have on the Sharia law and the jurisdictions of the Sharia. To do this with me now is Mohammed Umar, an imam and also somebody who has studied very deep into the Islamic studies. He has got his master's in Islamic studies and Arabic, also LLB and economic, and a founder and a consultant of Cityside Trust. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me this evening on Voice of Africa Radio. Not forgetting the lady, Elizabeth the Rock. Lembit, good evening to you, wherever you are in the traffic.
Good evening. One time we're going to have a program about the way that London traffic is worse than Lagos traffic now. I will be with you eventually, but I'm somewhere near Mile End, which for your listeners is probably about 2 miles away from the studio. But don't worry, I'm hands-free and being driven, so I'm not breaking the law.
Thank you very much for joining us via the telephone technology. We can even have it once before you get here. Elizabeth, yes, and Imam Mohammed Umar, good evening to you, and thank you for joining us on Voice of Africa Radio.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for in your show this evening. And thank you for the travel update, because I will be traveling that way a bit as well.
Thank you very much. But before we go on, Imam, the Sharia law being incorporated into the secular or the English law, what is Sharia to my listeners?
You see, unfortunately, the word Sharia has been it's been blown out of proportion and context. And I think if you ask anyone in the studio, when they hear the word Sharia, they'll most likely fear something maybe to do with a fatwa, to do with a death warrant. So the first thing is that when we want to know about the Sharia, we must look at the history of the Sharia. There's about 1,400 plus years of history where law, let's say, in all aspects of life, from family law to, when it comes to transactions, which we Muslims believe has been sent down, like all the great prophets of the past. You have the Old Testament, New Testament. So, just if I were to say within the Abrahamic link, the Quran not only confirms many of the laws of the previous religions of the, or let's say the people of the past, but it also sets some guidelines for us, in which there is firstly total submission to Allah, and setting a barrier. Because if you leave the law in the hands of the rich, then the poor will be affected. If you leave it in the hands of the poor, the rich will be affected. Sorry, I don't want to get carried away. The Sharia means the way, the path, and it's fundamentally extracted from the verses of the Quran and the interpretation, explanation of the Prophet, and then the legal system which was set as a result. And we have Sharia law in the UK.
We live in a secular state, Imam, if we may be fair to those that have hosted the Muslims here, whereby the laws of the land must be accepted by all. Why do we, or why do Muslims want to have their separate laws, whereas the laws of the land is not being observed, or wouldn't be observed by some people within the community, which is the Muslims?
First of all, Muslims in Britain do not want any separate Sharia law. It's common sense that if one's living in a secular state, and the Sharia law actually respects a Muslim who comes to or is born in a state which does not follow the Sharia, to abide by the law. This is an old, well-known reality extracted from the Sharia. And now, if somebody is living in a state like Britain, which is a secular state, and there's, in fact, it may sound strange to some of the people in the audience, they did a survey, and they said, they found in this survey, I can't exactly quote exact details, but it's found, you can find this online. They did a survey as to which country in the world is more Sharia compliant in terms of there's human rights, there's justice, there's equality. And they, in fact, found Ireland to be more Sharia compliant than many Muslim countries. And Sharia compliance simply means the British values which we have, from the Magna Carta to the Human Rights Act, which, you know, some of you may find quite strange that a Sharia scholar is telling you this, but a lot of these things, if we ignore history, we're actually ignoring the Sharia. These are things which even the Archbishop of Canterbury, some years ago, he got himself into trouble when he actually said
before
that we should benefit from the Sharia law for our finance.
Yes, before you go there, let us have Lembit. Lembit, is it prudent for Britain to incorporate Sharia law into the secular laws that we've got now?
It's down to a question of interpretation. You've just had a very eloquent and well-described analysis of what Sharia law means. But for different people, it means different things. There's a problem. And the problem is that Sharia law has been created into something very negative in the British media and the British press. It doesn't have to be that way. We just had the example that technically Ireland conforms to Sharia law more than some Muslim countries. That exactly explains the problem that we've got here in the United Kingdom, understanding it in a meaningful way. Now, I happen to have quite a strong faith myself, but that doesn't mean other people share that faith. What I have learned from it is that, by and large, the fundamentals of a person's faith in the three major religions of the world are actually quite similar. It's the details that cause the arguments. So, yes, it could be incorporated, but it will really come down to interpretation. And that dialogue has not even started, because at the moment, Sharia law and political interests, particularly in terms of Britain's military actions abroad, have got all very much mixed up.
Well, Elizabeth, you've been a family lawyer and looking at Sharia law. I know the understanding of the West is Sharia law oppresses women and denied some children of their property from their inheritance. Are you getting the right message in regards to Sharia law, or you are taking it from the misconceptual statement being made about Sharia law that you think Sharia shouldn't be incorporated, and the bill that is going through the House of Lords in regards to one law for all and criminalizing anybody who would think that they have the jurisdiction, however, but it is an advisory role that the Sharia court in England is playing?
Well, if we take the example, as you mentioned earlier, Adam, about the Law Society, at the beginning of this year, the Law Society produced Sharia-compliant wills leaflets on their website, and provision 3.6 stated quite clearly the provision that that inheritance would not necessarily include non-Muslims, women and adopted children, and children born out of wedlock. Now, when I say they wouldn't be included in inheritance, as I understand it, with a Sharia-compliant law, you're only allowed to give away 1/3 of your inheritance via will. I think there's strict guidelines with the remaining 2/3. So what the Law Society was saying was basically publicly stating that, yes, this is what happens when you want to prepare a Sharia-compliant law. These categories of people you can exclude. Now, this is quite shocking, really, for the Law Society to openly state such discrimination. And in fact, there has been a lot of criticism of the Law Society. It's rightly said, everything's down to interpretation. The Law Society got their sources from Dr. Mohammed Jibali, who's a Salafist. He is quite well known for holding quite extreme views. He's discussed inheritance, the blocking of inheritance to non-Muslims, children born out of wedlock, known as children of zina, and slave women. He has also exhorted the flogging and stoning of fornicators and has a very literalist and divisive interpretation of Sharia law. I have no idea why the Law Society decided to use him as a source. I find it quite incredible. There's been a huge amount of criticism across the board for the Law Society putting this forward as a proposed help guide for solicitors to prepare Sharia-compliant laws, and as a result they have had now to withdraw it. But let me just make it quite clear, if a will is signed and prepared as per the rules contained in the Wills Act 1837, basically you can leave whatever you want to whomever you want, no matter, you can discriminate however you wish. But you have to understand that any beneficiary who is not included, or any potential beneficiary who is not included in that will, has the right to make an application under the Inheritance Provision for Family Dependents Act 1975. So let's just make it quite clear that Sharia law has no jurisdiction in the United Kingdom. The government has no intention to change that position. And another big question we have to ask is, to what extent should our current UK courts recognise or enforce the judgments or arbitrations of any religious court? So I think it's right, really, that leaflet has been removed. It was removed by the Solicitors Regulation Authority on the 16th of July of this year, as it would be seen as to be publicly condoning such discrimination. Don't get me wrong, in the United Kingdom we had similar discrimination. Only until 1925 we had discrimination against daughters and younger sons, and only until 1970 we had discrimination against children born out of wedlock.
Mahmoud, now that we are facing, the country is in dire need of money, is it not right for section of people within the country saying that we don't want taxpayers to bear the brunt of our dispute, therefore we resort to religious laws like Sharia, whereby they can go and seek arbitration within the mosque and a recognized body giving them the...
I'll give you a prime example of what happened in Waltham Forest. In Waltham Forest, votes were miscounted by 1,000 votes. The council accepted liability that they were miscounted. They accepted it. The judge says still the losing party, that was the Liberal Democrat actually, had to go to court, have it counted. So we paid for a barrister, for secretaries, for this secretary, that secretary, and the whole bill came to about £25,000 or something, where the council had actually admitted liability, right? 25,000 of taxpayers' money going to waste. And you touch it. So if, for example, me and you have a dispute, we say, Elizabeth, look, he's arguing, we're arguing, Elizabeth, look, Elizabeth can be fair here. Elizabeth says, well, look, okay, we both agree that she's a fair person, she can judge it. And she makes a judgment. Why the law? Why waste taxpayers' money? Why the bureaucracy?
Well,
why not use common sense?
Imam Omar.
Yes, very interesting responses of coming across.
Let's talk about inheritance. That is the problem of the
sorry to be
the problem that the lawyers, some lawyers or the critic of the Sharia law is facing today is the Sharia law oppresses women. It doesn't give women the right that they are supposed to have within the society. It does not give inheritance to the so-called people born out of wedlock or bastards. It does not give right information to right platform to women, because they have half of the right that men have got in case of presenting their issues before the Sharia court. Are these things right, or is just ignorance of those who are criticizing the Sharia law?
This is again another example about the misconception that out there, even amongst lawyers, amongst people who study the law. And having a legal background myself, I can assure you that the Sharia, and I appreciate the lady's comment about the scholar they went to. See, I could go to the most extreme scholar and make Sharia look backward. But if you go to forward-thinking, balanced scholars, and Islam is a balanced religion between the two extremes. I mean, one of them said that we don't have Sharia in the UK. We actually have Sharia regulation in our financial institute. Britain is attracting billions just because it's appreciating the Sharia, the ethics the Sharia has when it comes to finance. This is why, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go away from inheritance. I'll come back to inheritance, but just to make the point, the Archbishop of Canterbury, in fact, during the financial crisis, said that we should actually benefit from the principles of Sharia to regulate our financial institutions. Coming to inheritance...
Now, the principles of Sharia does say that a woman should have a half of what a man gets.
This example, I'll tell you, if I have more time, I could actually do one show on its own and explain to everyone out there.
We'll give you the right to do that.
Yes, I would enjoy that one. Now, there are more than a dozen examples of where a woman inherits more than a man. I can show you those examples. Unfortunately, our Orientalists and our so-called Islamophobic academics will not show you those examples. The other thing is, in a Muslim society, we don't live in a Muslim society today. A woman is always looked after. She either has her parents, she has her husband. She does not need to worry about going to earn. And I would say this is something which was recently reiterated by a Turkish president just last weekend, where he said that men and women are equal in terms of their rights, but they have different roles and responsibilities. The feminist movement of the West has actually damaged the concept of motherhood. And, we have to accept these realities. A lot of the values which our fellow Christians hold in terms of, the family system holding... I'm involved in education. I know how problematic it is in society today when you have single mothers, you have problems with, children not behaving well, and you have the crime, the prisons.
Yes, but the question is, the bone of contention is, the bone of contention is, it is a law that is backwards, that does not give women the right as first-class citizens. So
Islamic law, the Sharia, gave the women more rights than any other. I can tell you with full confidence. And if you want, I could come and give you evidence upon evidence. In fact, in the Muslim world, women had rights which even the Europeans did not have until much later. Even as you give an example, the right to vote did not exist until much later. The unfortunate reality is, and this is a sad reality, in the eastern part of the world, it's the culture that's quite, it's very discriminative towards women. So it's not Islam. Islam does not discriminate against women.
Well,
in fact, it's the culture that discriminates against women, and they use Islam as a tool to discriminate against women.
Well, let's go to the financial aspect of it with Lembit. Lembit, let's look at now Britain is struggling We want some of the spending. We've been cutting spending. Judicial service, there is no more. You wouldn't have the aid to what is it called? The
legal aid.
Legal aid is no more there.
Yeah.
Therefore, if I want to seek arbitration, if I want to have a settlement, financial settlement, family issue, isn't it prudent for us to encourage more Islamic Sharia or religious laws so that some of these things can be addressed by their own and come to a consensus whereby a civil court can legitimize it?
I don't think so. The reason is because you have to have one system for a country, and if you start having different legal systems in the same country, that causes very serious problems. Now, we can argue about whether women have more or fewer rights under Islamic law, Sharia law, but actually it's a question of political and cultural and social stability. I don't think there's any excuse to say, well, we can't afford to have a good legal system, so therefore, or a consistent legal system, so let's give some of it out to churches. You could say the same then that the Catholic Church, the Protestant Church, the Baha'is, the Buddhists, that they should all have their own legal systems too. No society can work like that because everybody in that society interacts. So if there is a dispute, let's say, between a Protestant, an atheist, and a Muslim, then whose court do you use? It's obvious, therefore, that cannot be applied, and certainly shouldn't be applied for
What about if the two people agreed, Muslim and a Muslim agreed to use the Sharia court rather than going to the court of competence jurisdiction?
I think that's legitimate. I think that's fair enough, as long as the law of the land itself has not been broken. Now, arbitration is 100% okay as long as everybody agrees with it and there isn't a major legal challenge within the system that's going on. So, for example, if two people have a car accident, let's say, and there wasn't actually a broken law, it could be that in that situation people need to say, okay, let's work it out according to the agreed, let's say, Sharia arrangement. But if, on the other hand, one person breaks into another person's house, you have to have consistency with the law of the land to make sure that those laws remain. Think about the opposite. If it doesn't happen, we end up with anarchy. And it's not good for people who believe in Sharia law either, because then they'll be touched on a random basis based on whether it's going to be a Catholic Church, Protestant Church. But summarising again, if people agree to arbitration, there's no reason that should not occur under Sharia law if everybody agrees and no law of the land has been broken.
Well, Elizabeth.
Yes, Adam.
The argument of women not having the same right as men.
Yes.
I think you becoming a bit satisfied that under the Islamic law, women's...
I'm not satisfied because, as I said, the Law Society, in its provision for preparation of Sharia-compliant laws this year, paragraph 3.6, made it quite clear that you can expect discrimination against non-Muslims, women, adopted children, and children born out of wedlock. That was crystal clear from the Law Society. It didn't come from me, it didn't come from...
But non-Muslims wouldn't go to Sharia court to seek
Can I just
arbitration.
add on something there?
No, I haven't. No, I'll continue talking. No, I'm going to continue talking. Right, and as I stated earlier, the Law Society got their sources from Dr. Mohammed Al-Jibali, a Salafist. I do not know why the Law Society ignored British Muslim experts who perhaps would have more of a sensitivity to ensure that there was reconciliation between
maybe they wanted to
equality.
have third opinion, but
no,
not
that they should
Muslim
have gone
society.
to a UK Islam specialist who's used to the reconciliation of equality laws and faith. Now, with regard to arbitration, let me just make it clear. Everyone seems to think this is a money issue. It is not a money issue. This year, the Children and Families Act 2014, Section 10 of that Act, said that no one can go to court for a family matter, obviously unless there's been serious domestic violence or emergency matters are called into play, unless they've gone through mediation. Everyone here is funneled into mediation. Like at Olympia, you're funneled into mediation.
But according to according to the bill being taken to the House of Lords, they said the Sharia law promotes domestic violence. How can it promote domestic violence?
Well, okay, many people's view of Sharia law is, I'll just run through a couple of the sort of classic Sharia law examples. We have a situation whereby, let's say, theft, punishment for theft, amputation of the right hand. Any analysis or critique of the Quran, death penalty. To criticise, deny Muhammad, death penalty. If you convert from Islam, death penalty. For a non-Muslim to lead a Muslim away from the Muslim faith, death penalty. For a non-Muslim man to marry a Muslim woman, death penalty. Adultery, 100 lashes plus stoning if married. For a woman's going to get half of a man's estate. So these are like the standard. I appreciate everything subject to interpretation, right? So there have been issues with the Islamic arbitration. In 2013, BBC Panorama documentary actually did a secret documentary about Britain's Sharia courts or councils, and actually found that many of these councils were actually discouraging women from seeking help for domestic abuse. So it's not really the best way forward. We already have very good, adequate mediation on tap, paid for by the government, which if you're a low income or you've got limited savings, you can tap into for free. It's not an economic situation. There is only one law in this country, and it's the law of the United Kingdom, the secular law. That is the only one law. May I just say, though, the Islamic financial instruments, the financial banking that's coming into this country, Islamic compliant banking, Islamic compliant finance, fantastic. It brings in a huge amount of trade for this country. Yes, we like it. But it doesn't actually impact upon people's personal lives, doesn't impact on the family situation, doesn't impact on crime. So what the Arbitration Act, basically, bill is saying that no arbitration.
Now, the misconception of the Sharia law as compared to what is the right of the Sharia law, I think is something that is lacking, isn't it? The understanding of the Sharia law itself.
Well, it's so subject to interpretation.
Yes. So let's go to Imam Mohammed. She has made a lot of statements in regards to the death penalty and some of the sentences under the Sharia, that stolen, your right arm should be chopped off. If you are not Muslim, you are Muslim and you revert to Christianity, you have to be killed. And
can I just mention, Elizabeth, I appreciate her point, and she keeps referring to the Law Society, and also acknowledges that they went to a Salafist scholar. You see, the Sharia law has a history, and when the British arrived in the Indian subcontinent, they found the Sharia law quite convenient, and they in fact translated many of their books, and they in fact adopted a lot of Islamic law, the Sharia law, into the legal system in the Indian subcontinent. But the problem we have in Britain is that, yes, we do accept that some very extremist type of Islam has been imported into this country, whether it's been done deliberately just to spice up the situation, that's another argument. But when it comes to equality, everybody has their own definition of equality. When it comes to, let's say, in this example, before I forget my point about arbitration, I want to say something from my own practice. I have had hundreds of people coming to me when it comes to husband and wife, they've got an issue between them, and they want to go for a divorce. They come to me and they ask me to give me some guidance from the Sharia perspective. Now, if I was a greedy solicitor, no offense to solicitors, I would love a divorce, simply because of the money I make. But what my fear of God told me to do is, at stage number one, I become a counsellor, not just a judge. I have turned back a dozen plus couples who were on the verge of divorce without any money, no extra fees, nothing. One verse of the Quran, one statement of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, it melts their heart and they need to get inside. So if you are telling me that this is problematic, then unfortunately we have lost our touch with reality. And when it comes to this arbitration and there's some guidelines, I appreciate that, because there is no discrimination against non-Muslims. And I will tell you that the interpretation I would take is somebody has a non-Muslim or somebody has an illegitimate
one last question is it permissible? Is it permissible for a Muslim man to get married to a Christian woman under Islam?
The Quran says clearly yes. I don't know which scholar doesn't understand that verse.
Yes, and what about the other way round?
When it comes to the other way around, there are conditions laid down, mainly because historically, in the culture of Muslim countries, a woman generally she's vulnerable and she would end up being influenced. So they have set some guidelines, but it's no way discriminative. It's based upon understanding. And if Islam, you see, if Muslims believe that Islam is the truth, they have a right to keep Islam on the top. We live in Britain, we have human rights. If my religion gives me the confidence to believe that I'm on the right, as long as I'm not interfering in no one else's life, I've got full rights. From the Magna Carta to the Human Rights Act, this is what we've been fighting for over the years. So I don't know why you suddenly become so offended with Muslims. We want your money, we want your oil, we want your finance. But
hold on, Mahmoud Faiz is also Mahmoud. The Sharia and the people who follow Sharia and the secular state, laws of the land, which is ultimate. If you disagree with the laws of the land, you are not permissible under even Islam.
But let me tell you something. I'm a citizen of the UK in a secular society, as you can tell from my name, Mahmoud, I'm a Muslim. Yeah, no surprise. And the guidance laid by Sharia law is that I'm bound by my Sharia law to act for the benefit of this country and for the defense of this country. I.e., if someone's to attack this country, by my Sharia law, I'm supposed to defend the king and the queen and the parliament of this country. So, the second thing, I think we're all getting away from the argument. What the Sharia, what Elizabeth maybe missed in the argument was that what the legal term was, some of the lawyers asked, could you give us some guidance? And they barely gave a guidance. There was no law. There was no law being changed. The law is exactly the same in the UK. There are in other communities.
But under the Sharia court.
Please allow me to finish, Adam, and I can complete the sentence. And what happens, you see, is already within the Jewish community, they have a very similar thing, and it works very well. Britain's not come to an end. Society has not come to an end. And if two people of same faith think that they can solve the issue without having to pay rich lawyers, why not? Common sense. I'll give you a prime example now. The planning application was 500 pages big. By bringing the planning down to saying, well, if the neighbours agree on the planning and nobody disagrees, then the local authority will have no say in it. Or if me and you agree, then local authority has no say. That's come down to 50 pages. Why can't we do that for? Why do we have to have rich lawyers?
Elizabeth, why do we have to have you? Whereas I can go to the mosques and seek arbitration.
Well, because we have a secular society which has secular law, which is interpreted by the courts, and people...
The law has not been changed. It's not changed.
The law has not been changed at all. I think you missed the point, Mahmoud, because the Law Society introduced a guidance.
Yeah, guidance. Don't change the law.
Said the law had been changed. This is your misinterpretation. You're not listening to what I'm saying. The Law Society produced a guidance about how to prepare Sharia-compliant wills. Provision 3.6 clearly stated about the acceptance of discrimination, excluding a caste of people from inheritance, namely non-Muslims, women, adopted children, and children.
But don't you think that we need clarification that if we have problems with the Sharia, why don't we consult people who are well-versed and who knows much about the Sharia law before we criticize?
If you want a Sharia law prepared, then by all means, I don't understand why the Law Society producing this guideline. You should just go to an expert in Sharia and sort of bypass the situation. I do understand people's concerns. It does seem to be a condoning of this line of discrimination. If the Law Society would never, ever put forward any provision publicly which discriminated against any race or religion, but they're quite happy to do that with regard to women. They would never do that.
Imam, let's get the Imam's view and we end this topic and start with another topic.
These fathers for justice, they get discriminated against. So, I mean, are we saying that?
But the Sharia law is also saying that if you are bringing in the fathers for justice, the Sharia law is saying that the woman does not have a right to have a right over her children. The man has the right over his children.
No,
so do you believe that this is right under this society?
It's right. It's based upon what's best for the child. And this is where we got another...
What says that a woman having a child is not best for the child?
No. When you say the woman has no right over the child and the man has... There's no such thing. There is what's best for the child. And I will confirm that this is how the Sharia is interpreted. When the child is young and he needs the mother, then the Sharia would say that the best person for the child is the mother. unless the mother has some reason she won't be able to be neglecting the child, then the child doesn't stay with the mother, it goes to someone else.
Yes, Imam, we've got Lembit in the studio. We'll get back to you.
Very small point. Yeah, I finally made it to the studio.
Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
I've listened with great interest to the debate so far. Two very short points. I think that our legal expert is completely right in the sense that if two people want to make an agreement which doesn't really require a lawyer, they can do anything they want. There's no problem. There's nothing stopping them doing that. The second thing is that in response to our friend, the one remaining person on the phone, if we are all agreeing that we want to do what's best, for example, for the child, we're really only discussing what that is. And no one's suggesting we'd do what's worst for the child. That's the opportunity for the negotiation. If we hold to our guns, we don't listen to each other, then it doesn't work. If we begin to have the negotiation, then society can work.
Yes, Imam Muhammad Umir, a scholar, a Sharia expert, consultant, economics, and also the founding father of Cityside Trust. Before you go, your final word in the Sharia. Do you believe that we can have it and you will serve the society very well rather than disintegrating our existing laws?
Look, the Sharia has never been a threat to humanity, to society. I mean, Britain has a great legacy of conquering the world. You can ask our historians who went all over the world. They admired the Sharia. They admired how it brought justice in Africa, in Asia. So in Britain, there's no need to panic. We're more open than most European countries, and we're tolerant. That's what makes Britain special. Being born and raised in London, I admire the equality, the justice.
Thank you, Imam. Thank you.
Simply because I see Islam.
Thank you very much, and we will discuss this thoroughly next time because time wouldn't allow us. We will talk to you and discuss this thoroughly on Voice of Africa Radio. Thank you very much for your time with us on Voice of Africa Radio. Well, we are in the studio today at the 1st of December 2014. We're still on Voice of Africa, and the program is inside. I've got in the studio Elizabeth The Rock Jones, prospective parliamentary candidate for UKIP, the upcoming and rising star of Great Britain anti-everything political party, being said by Tony Blair and Sir Major, saying UKIP is anti-everything political party, and they are now gaining strides and are making the dancing tune for Mr. Cameron. I have Mahmoud Faiz, Liberal Democrat, Leighton and Wanstead, and also a human rights activist and a former MP for Liberal Democrats. Lembit is in the studio with me this evening. Thank you for joining us once again. Eurosceptic tendencies in the United Kingdom. Mr. Cameron wouldn't hesitate at all now getting Britain out of the EU. Lembit, is it just a ploy by Cameron to rule the supporters of UKIP, or he is definitely going to hold his guns coming to negotiation in the European Union if terms and conditions that he is taking in there does not come into his do not favour him?
It's a ploy, but it's one that's got him caught. There's no doubt, in my view at least, that Nigel Farage, the leader of UKIP, has played a very clever game and quite an informed game in this country. And two of the great mistakes people have made about Nigel Farage and UKIP are, number one, to dismiss them as racist, which they're not. Number two, to dismiss them as in some way nuts or insane, which they're not. The reason they've just won 2 by-elections, so that now they have 2 members of parliament, is because they speak in a way that a lot of people want to hear. Your question is very interesting. What would Cameron do? What would the Conservative Prime Minister do if he doesn't get his way in his negotiations? Well, he has actually backtracked this week, so he's gone softer on his anti-European position, but even more importantly, he's got his backbenchers, the ones you point out. My judgment is that at the end of the day, he will have to talk about leaving the European Union, and if the Conservatives win the next election, they probably won't, but if they did, I'm sure they would have to have a referendum on that matter.
Would that be in the good interest of Britain if we leave the European Union, or we attempt
Well, I can only speak personally. There's an official representative of my old party here. I'll leave him to give the party line. My opinion is that, on balance, the three things that the European Union was set up for, that's economic prosperity, preventing the social collapse after the war, and preventing another war, they've all been achieved. But what has really annoyed people, not just Eurosceptics, but a lot of people, is the amount of regulation and law that comes in, which isn't necessary. And so what's really happened is the public feel patronised by the old parties, Conservative, Labour and Liberal Democrat, and they feel in some ways connected with the new party, UKIP, because UKIP speaks not political language, but human language. And however much...
What do you mean, human language?
Well, they just speak, they say...
Human language, we shouldn't give the poor Romanian who is now in Britain seeking job, we shouldn't give him...
They've certainly made mistakes there. I think I can speak with authority that I'm very keen on Romanians, and I've got a lot of experience. Some of your listeners will know what I mean.
Very cheeky comment, I think.
Yeah. And so I've travelled a lot around Europe with my job, and I think that when they say things like that, it's badly worded because they're still a maturing organisation. I just think it's silly to suggest that they're racist, but they are talking about immigration in a way that a lot of people want to discuss it. I don't think most UKIP voters are racist. They just want to be heard.
That's why I became a friend to Elizabeth. Elizabeth.
Yes, Adam.
We would deport every European migrant who hasn't got a job for 6 months. Is this going to happen?
Of course it's not going to happen. This whole speech, Cameron's whole speech, is just completely pointless. It's empty, it's sabre-rattling to no cause. Nothing's going to go.
But you caused it.
I know we caused it, but he thinks he's more intelligent than the electorate and more intelligent than his backbenchers, and thinks that he can hoodwink everyone into believing what he said. He cannot square EU membership with number control. In 2004, we have the 2004-38 EC Free Movement Directive, which made it quite clear that every member of the EU is perfectly entitled to move and reside freely throughout the whole of the EU. He will need a treaty change to change that. And why would any other country be behind the United Kingdom? It's not going to happen. These treaties need unanimous vote to be changed. And why would, let's say, Czechoslovakia, why would Poland support him in that? They're not. It's rubbish. It's absolutely patronising that he thinks anyone's going to believe him. I find it incredible. And let us just backtrack on what a liar Cameron is. In 2010, Cameron said that he wanted to enter into a contract with the electorate, and he said he was determined to bring net migration down to the pre-Labour levels of tens of thousands per annum instead of the hundreds of thousands. Of course, he failed. 2011, he said, no ifs, no buts, I am going to bring net migration below 100,000. Again, he failed. End of June 2014, net migration, £240,000. People, of course, 240,000 people. So he fails every time. He is lies as he breathes.
Oh, that's strong.
Well, Mahmoud, now we haven't to go into this debate again, whereby European Union has issued a statement that every member state has a right to curbing the benefits of the migrant wherever they go. Now, the attention will be shifting to migrant coming in, working. And if you haven't worked for 4 years, you are not going to get any benefit whatsoever. Child benefits cannot be exported to any other country. The stand of Liberal Democrats, or as a Liberal Democrat...
Well, I mean, I don't speak for central government. I mean, I merely speak for Leighton Wanstead. So thank you, Liberal, for the... sorry, but, this... What David Cameron said, absolutely right. I'm agree with both sides. Is absolute bluff. But he's not the only one bluffing. UKIP is bluffing. When UKIP asked you to elect their MEP, they say, anti-Euro is going to help you and get out. What have they done? Go to the website, check how many of them actually bother even attending. None. Yet they're still quite happy to pocket your... Hold on, let me finish. But they're quite happy to pocket the money. There's nothing stopping them from pocketing the money, giving it to charity. I'm not saying that. So let's see how genuine they are. Second of all, UKIP have to elect how many? 325 MPs to get a majority. Even after that, even if they manage to get everything to every one of those MPs, soon as the large corporation, Nissan, all of Google, all of these big companies say, look, if you're not going to trade with Europe, we can't do business here. We'll go to France across the water. You tell how Nigel Farage does a U-turn quicker than David Cameron.
Elizabeth?
Absolute tosh, we can survive.
No, write it down. Write it on a bit of paper. Write it in stone.
Stop interrupting me, Mahmood.
I'm giving instructions.
No, it's absolute tosh. It is correct, the UKIP MEPs don't seek to engage with the European Parliament. If you remember when the European Parliament had its opening ceremony this year, all the UKIP MEPs turned their back on that ceremony. The idea is that we do not engage with the European Parliament, we do not recognise its sovereignty of the United Kingdom, and the aim is to spread the message to the United Kingdom, and we've been extraordinarily successful. As for the number of MPs that Mahmood says that we need, we don't really need that many. We are already the political energy of this country, and everyone dances to our tune. Why do you think Cameron had this speech? Why
but Liberal Democrats is not dancing to the tune of UKIP.
No disrespect, they're finished. They are finished.
I think it's a bit strong. I mean, I'm still...
You've got 2 MPs.
I've got a lot
We've got 24.
Are you finished? Is your party finished?
The party's not finished, but unfortunately, and I'm still a member of the Liberal Democrats, unfortunately, the fact that people like Nick Clegg really ignore what UKIP is saying and really seek to...
But Nicholas stood against Nigel Farage. He was the only...
Yeah, he did, and he lost both debates. He actually lost the first debate and he lost the second debate by more. The difficulty is people like Nick Clegg, who is perfectly entitled to be the leader if he wants to be. I think I've got issues with that. But the thing is, he seeks to rubbish UKIP. He seeks to write UKIP off. And Elizabeth is right. I think there has been an attempt to patronise the public and say, oh, you can't vote UKIP because they're racist and stupid. They're not racist and they're not stupid. Here's an example. I work, one of my jobs, I work for the Motorcycle Action Group. They look after motorcyclists. They're not very political. They're not pro or anti-Europe particularly, but they're really fed up with regulations which come in from Brussels and make it more difficult for them to ride their motorbikes. Regulations about what they can ride, or how they can ride, what they have to wear when they ride. And UKIP speaks to a lot of those people by saying, we are really sick of the regulations. Now, the only way, and I mean the only way, that the other parties can stop the UKIP advance is by talking rationally and in an intelligent way with UKIP, not simply writing them off. As for Lib Dems, they have a lot of problems. That's not really just about UKIP. It's interesting to note they were the only party of the only totally pro-European party in the European elections, and they returned one single member of Parliament. I think that says something that Nick Clegg and the others need to listen to.
Well, you still listening to Voice of Africa Radio, 53 minutes after 7 o'clock. Mahmoud Faiz, Liberal Democrat, Leighton and Wanstead. Lembit is also here in the studio with me. Elizabeth The Rock Jones, the political energy of Great Britain today.
Personally, she is personally that political energy.
Now, seeing as you believe that whatever Mr. Cameron is saying is just throwing dust into the eye of the electorate, and you think he can never do it even if they get majority in Parliament in 2015 general election, you believe that there wouldn't be any referendum, or he wouldn't make an attempt to get Britain out of European Union if his plans to curb migration fails?
Of course, I don't think he's got any intention whatsoever of doing that. I think he's...
Now, it's been proven that the European migrants who come into Britain have contributed a lot to the British economy. What about that? Do you still don't believe that we need more migrants coming in to take a job that the British citizens wouldn't do?
Well, it's all about balance. No, it's all very well and good in saying that people coming to the United Kingdom are contributing toward our tax receipts. However, we've had, as I say, toward the end of June of this year, 240,000 net migration. I believe about 142,000 of that was from the EU. Well, if it's so great for the economy, why have our tax receipts gone down so much this year? We have less unemployment than the rest of Europe at 6%, and our tax receipts are going down.
Your economy has been lauded by the European Union. That is why they are still demanding the 1.7 billion of Britain to support the budget.
It's not just the economy. You have to understand that this is going back, I think, perhaps to 1995. It's a change in the accountancy rules, and what the EU is now all embracing. You've got to factor in the grey economy, that is the quasi-illegal economy, drug dealing, prostitution. I do not know how you do that, but they want that factored in. We also have to factor in the charity sector. We also have to factor in the amount of money that we're spending on arms. And of course, in this country, the British government is probably paying a lot of money to British arms manufacturers because we are engaged militarily all the time, all over the world, unnecessarily. And so that these issues arise. And also, it's because we spend a lot on research and development and science. So these are the factors which have resulted in a massive demand for payment. It's not purely the economy, it's not just GDP, it's all these other factors as well. So I'm not going to say that I appreciate that many people coming to the country. Of course they're doing fantastic work, we need them. I don't think we necessarily need the numbers that are coming through, and we certainly need a quality control system. For instance, we had the recent awful case of the poor elderly couple being randomly murdered by some man, I understand, who has quite a criminal record back in his home country.
Those are the exceptions, really.
No, they are exceptions, but they are...
That's not a fair argument. I'm quite sympathetic to what you're saying, but you can't take individual examples. Still, most crime in the United Kingdom, I'd be willing to bet, is from homegrown sources.
But if you look at the prison population,
a third is...
I think Lembit Öpik made a very good point. And this was really brilliant. It'd been good if he was there when the London mayor came and a UKIP candidate having to turn up there, and he saw 2 14, 50-year-old girls or 18, they look like that, and he said, what do you feel about all these rapists coming in from European countries? And the girl looked up at him and said, well, what's the difference between a British rapist then? A criminal is a criminal, and just to pick these points, they're just scaremongering. Let's not go along this line. Let's not throw stones of hatred. Let's work together. Don't forget, it's these throw stones of hatred that ended up with the First World War, Second World War. Let's have the youth of our country work for this country, live for this country, and not die for this country.
Our own laws and regulations. What is wrong? We keeping the 50 or so million pounds we give to.
We do make our own law. We do make our own law. The laws that you keep telling your European law actually are enshrined into UK law.
But the problem is...
It's throwing stones at an artificial wall.
When I was an MP, what I saw was regulations or directives coming from the European Union and being turned into far bigger laws in the United Kingdom. One of the reasons UKIP is doing well is because this slavish obedience to what's come out of Strasbourg and Brussels, which has really annoyed people. I gave you a real actual...
But why is it that we wouldn't speak in terms of the regulations that we get from the European Union? Why aren't we against that, but rather free movement of people within the European Union, people coming into Britain?
On the first one, the civil service seems very happy to gold plate. That's what the phrase we use, gold plate regulations coming in from the European Union. And as I say, a real life example, 1.5 million motorcyclists who ride their bikes every week are fed up with getting more regulations.
Homes which will be needing heavy powered motor hoovers are not going to get it anymore.
But that's the thing, you actually have reductions in...
Well, I can comment on that, actually.
I'm interested to hear Mahmoud's answer to that. But the other point, the big one about migration, that's a really hot issue because the British media, I think, does sound racist. And they are very happy to make it sound like crime has been imported, that these people come here and scrounge from our benefits. Actually, a very small proportion of our benefits go there. I think one thing UKIP might be able to improve in terms of their presentation is the way they talk about that. It's not my business to tell UKIP how to discuss it, because I don't think UKIP is fundamentally racist, but I do think sometimes they push it a little bit
further. Well, thank you very much, but before we go, we should be snappy with our comment. It's nearly time wouldn't allow us to continue on with any further discussion. I thank you very much, Elizabeth The Rock Jones, for joining me this morning, and former MP Lembit, also Liberal Democrats, thank you for joining me. Mahmoud Faiz, Liberal Democrats, Leighton and Wanstead, thank you very much for also joining me. Well, listeners, I thank you very much for being part of this program, started from 7 till now. You heard from my resourceful people this evening. News at 8 next. Catch us same time next week, Monday, between the hours of 7 and 8 on Voice of Africa Radio. Do stay tuned and don't go away. You still tune into Voice of Africa Radio.